Connected to iPhone.
GM employee program participants with an eligible GM lease can get this.
Man, drop that shit for these fuck niggas.
currently trapping in Japan.
China like who's a kitchen? Whipping it, fishing breaking. Making no syrup from rolling them hair. Make myself a boss of the floor. Either way you put it, nigga, I'm real. Triple salute, niggas straight out the hood. Make a soda water splash on scales. My right and my pot and my left. Lean it all way over to the side. I put me a full way to a nine. The dirty, the money is homicide. In my recipe, young nigga move that dough. Young nigga move that dough, baby, move that dough, baby, move that dough. Young nigga move that dough. Young nigga move that dough. Young nigga move that dough, baby, move that dough, baby, move that dough. Young nigga move that dough. Young nigga move that dough. Young nigga move that dough, baby, move that dough, baby, move that dough. Young nigga move that dough. Young nigga move that dough. Young nigga move that dough, baby, move that dough, baby, move that dough. Young nigga move that dough.
Young enough to still sell dope, but old enough that I know better. When they saying it's 42 for that white powder, I know better. Nigga, I know better. Put a smile on the devil's face. Who don't wanna sell dope forever and sell their booty to the scale of the first door that I fit tails. Hourglass, Ferrari leather, and the designer shit that I fit spent. Yeah, look at the tools, the G's, the jewels, I'm missing them all. Yeah, I'm 15 years old, I'm working the kids. Pop low, but 30 waiting for me gold. My dinner plate, silverware. This is my E-hole. Feel like a street roll. Crack house had a peephole. Phoenix road to the other side. Now listen, this is my
I don't even know which one. I'm gonna start out with a little teeny one. Man, I ain't finished none of them shit. Young nigga move that dope. Young nigga move that dope. Young nigga move that dope. Move that, young nigga move that. All that shit in there. Yo, Puff, what up? Yo, Puff, I got the whole series, yo, the whole Dank series, bro. So, this right here, part 1.
chest like a project weapon. And you see I'm having things still, I'm gon' keep it flat. Keep it knocking all the time. I ain't thinking about no justice on the speed, don't shut. So still keep it back. One way or another, no. I ain't compromising with the joy. I ain't stuck, don't do much, don't put a head down. I ain't gotta eat if I get the box. I'ma go to eat. Like sentence in the beat. What they want you to do is see it, get it right, take the cheese. All that other stuff, they do that I still ride. Cold reels that I shoot it through. Still hanging through my dogs every cause, money was, get a star, good boss, feeling in charge, I'm gon' keep it, I got any cause, money was, get a star, good boss, feeling in charge, I'm gon' keep it, take me out the hood, I'ma keep it hood, keep it hood, take me out the hood, I'ma keep it hood, keep it hood, take me out the hood, I'ma keep it hood, keep it hood. I'm so good, man. The big now keep the charges. Twins, get blow. And this is the sweatshirt. Get a dog, get a car. It's a
Oh, that's it, Boozy. For this right here, it's just gonna be these 3 canvases. So my next 2 series are gonna be 3 canvases each, and they're all gonna be self-portraits. I've done a series of 3 self-portraits before. It's a part of the writer series. So I did those. This piece right here has 2 other pieces that go with it, and it's just 3 self-portraits, but each canvas has an original poem that I had written on it. Well, one of them is actually a verse from one of my songs, and the other 2 are poems that I had written. And so that was my first trilogy self-portrait series. So this right here is going to be my second trilogy of self-portraits, and then I already have a third one that's already photographed. I just have to, after I work my way through these 3 canvases, I'll go on to the next one, and then after that I'll get back into some of my my Black Love series that I was doing. But my reader series is always going to be like my flagship series. That shit is never going to end. As long as I keep reading good books, I'm going to keep incorporating literature and educational reading material into my artwork. I think I'm going to keep that as my main focus for my art. So my reader series that shit is just non-ending. Right now I probably have like 10 paintings with people reading books in it. And hopefully I have like 50 of them. I already have an idea for my next one. So, but since I'm doing all these self-portraits right here, I'm really gonna need some models to help with my next series. I don't want to oversaturate the shit with myself, even though I'm the fucking shit. You know what I'm saying? I just, you know what I'm saying, I don't want to get conceited, constantly looking at myself like that. Not as if I'm conceited already, but I'm just, you know. Yeah, the reader series is the shit, yo. That shit gets so much feedback. Every year I put out the reader series plus its editions for Black History Month. You know what I'm saying? And it's good, man. I get inspired by my own reader series. Like every time I look at it, I'm like, nigga, you need to go read a book. Sit here playing video games and shit. On the PSVR, I don't know, bro. I ain't really played that shit since. I ain't even gonna lie to you. I ain't played that shit since the last time I played that bitch, like last year. But I don't know. I really haven't even heard anything really good. The last good thing that I really was kind of interested in was Skyrim VR, but they said it was a whole new game. It wasn't going to be a patch that you can download or a DLC that you can add on to. Because I've had all the Skyrims. So I had the original Skyrim on PS3. Then you had the remastered Skyrim. So I got a copy of that. Then they had Elder Scrolls Online. So I got that. And then there's like Skyrim VR. I was like, all right, but it's a whole different game. It's the same game, same story, but the format had to be changed so much that I guess it was just too large for a patch or a DLC, so they actually had to make a whole game, and it's like $60. I was like, nah, fuck that. I've played Skyrim enough. But then when you watch, so I tried to watch some other streamers play Skyrim VR, and it's just not the same effect. Like you don't really feel it like that, yo. But I can imagine like fighting a dragon or an ogre in VR, slicing some skeletons in VR and shit, running through the fucking dungeons, open up chests and shit, man. I bet that shit is cool as shit in a VR, but I just didn't want to kick out the extra money for that shit, yo. Honestly. I don't know. I was in that shooter game, Farpoint. I never really got that shit. I don't know. I kind of fell off that VR shit. Once came out, Ghost Recon Wildlands, that's the only thing I've been playing. But I just wanted to really add, like, because I'm still a big gamer, so just the different personalities that smokers can have. Everybody has this fucking narrow-minded, contrived concept of what a pothead is. And now since it's becoming legalized in more places. Let me see if I can find this one thing.
Has such an incredible taste that you can cut. Welcome to Spain, Bellas.
So this is the first base. Will we be going to second base with you guys?
My name is Andrea Drummer, and I am a cannabis chef. I've been doing this since 2012. I don't want you to smell the cannabis or taste it. I just want you to have a great food experience knowing that there is THC involved. People think of edibles as a very high dosage. For me, when I came into the industry, I had to educate people about edibles. I was begging people to come to my dinners because they were deathly afraid. So this is roughly about 6 servings of Chinese broccoli. So what I tend to do is kind of dilute it, if you will, because the milligrams in the butter is about 210 milligrams per teaspoon. I only need a little bit. Anything with a fat content or a carb content will definitely get you higher. The edibles industry is evolving tremendously. And so people are becoming a lot more sophisticated in it. And, the demographic of people that are indulging. But you know that if you're coming to an Elevation VIP event, you know what's going to happen. You're going to get elevated.
But that's what I'm saying, man. Motherfucking, the pot culture is changing. And you can't define you know, you can't define a pot smoker nowadays as lazy and unambitious, and it's not fucking true. It's not. It's just not true. So, and that's why I'm doing this dank series.
To just taste weed, I would do this a different way. But I want to taste the filet mignon, I want to taste the lamb, I want to taste the buffalo, whatever it is. And I may want to get buzzed too.
They aren't just trying to make a weed product, they're trying to make an art out of it.
Green rush. And there's tons and tons of people
Passed a law legalizing the recreational use of marijuana.
who are doing all kind of good shit, yo. And a lot of people know I smoke, and a lot of people don't know I smoke. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why I put like the different personalities in there. The artist, you may or you may not even know the artist smoke, or the professional, the businessman, or the crazy gamer. You know, so there's all different type of people, and that don't make any of them bad, or you know what I'm saying, or criminal or anything like that. Weed popcorn.
You are watching a master at work.
The Elevation VIP event. Oh, you know it. Doom VR? Yo, the Star Trek is VR?
The deeper we look into space, the farther back we see in time.
Light travels 670 million miles an hour, but even at this speed, light from even the closest big galaxies takes millions of years to reach us.
Looking deep is looking back to when the universe was younger. Right now, our best tool for viewing the young universe is the Hubble Space Telescope.
This is Hubble's deepest view into space, known as the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. Here, astronomers have found galaxies so far away that their light began its journey to us more than 13 billion years ago.
We're seeing these galaxies as they were when the universe was just 600 million years old.
In human terms, this discovery is comparable to a teenager looking at a 6-month-old baby.
But for these galaxies, the universe was no nursery. It was more like a brutal football game.
The earliest galaxies were small dwarfs, smaller even than the ones Hubble has seen. They grew by colliding and merging with other small galaxies, as shown in this simulation.
Over billions of years, these mergers built up the giant galaxies we see today. Mergers triggered pulses of star formation that created the elements necessary for planets, and ultimately, life. But to see beyond Hubble, to witness the origin and development of galaxies, astronomers need a new tool. This is Hubble's successor, the James Webb Space Telescope, which is now being built.
Its mirror, 2.75 times the size of Hubble's, and instruments are optimized for a part of the spectrum where the most distant galaxies shine, the infrared. Hubble sees infant galaxies.
The James Webb Space Telescope will see newborns.
MIRI is one of the 4 instruments on board the James Webb Space Telescope. It's the one instrument on board the telescope that will be observing at mid-infrared wavelengths. The other instruments focus on the near-infrared part of the spectrum.
NIRSpec, NIRCam, and the FGS, they work at wavelengths from about 1 to 4 or 5 microns. Now, MIRI is unique on the James Webb because it operates at even longer wavelengths than that. So we start at 5 microns and we keep going out to 25, 30 microns.
MIRI is actually quite a complex instrument. It has several different observing modes on board in the instrument. So we have a camera that just takes images in lots of different filters across the mid-infrared wavelength range. We also have spectroscopic modes, so we have low-resolution spectroscopy, and we also have a medium-resolution integral field spectrograph.
When you look inside our own galaxy, you can see dusty regions. And there's things going on inside those clouds, inside the dust, that you can't see because dust is essentially opaque. If you move out to longer wavelengths, out into the infrared, the opacity, the amount of light that is absorbed by that dust drops. And so we can see not just the surface, but into the heart of dusty region. So that means we can see to the center of our own galaxy more easily. We can see inside dusty regions where stars are being formed and see them, see what's really going on in the star is formed in space.
We're really going to be able to address a huge range of science questions. MIRI is going to be able to probe even further back into the history of the universe. It's going to be able to really study the atmospheres of planets around other stars and really be able to kind of search for the signatures of molecules in those atmospheres. Those are just a few of the highest kind of profile science goals that we hope to achieve with MIRI.
The James Webb Space Telescope. Here at NASA, we have been eagerly awaiting the launch of JWST, the James Webb, now scheduled for the spring of 2019. Over the past several decades, the Hubble Space Telescope and other great observatories on the ground and in space, like the Compton, Spitzer, Chandra, and the Explorer, especially the COBE, the Cosmic Background Explorer, have presented us with a wholly new view of the universe. But it's a glimpse. How it started, we have glimpsed, and how it might end, we have glimpsed. This new view has, of course, raised many new questions that we hope JWST will answer. It has certainly been designed to do so. So our series this year is devoted to articulating those questions and meeting the telescope that was built to answer them. Dr. John Mather is very well known to all of us here at NASM and around the world. He's been for some years senior astrophysicist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center and is now the project manager for the James Webb Space Telescope. Dr. Mather's research focuses on infrared astronomy and cosmology. As a postdoctoral fellow at the Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York in the mid-1970s, Dr. Mather led the proposal efforts to what became COBE, the Cosmic Background Explorer, which launched in November 1989 on a Delta 5000 launch vehicle. Dr. Mather began work then at the Goddard Space Flight Center in a project that led to COBE. As a study scientist, then he became project scientist and then principal investigator for one of the three principal instruments that is on COBE, and that, of course, another selfless plug, we also have a model of on display in the Explorer of the Universe gallery. And he's been leader of many, many science teams representing scientific interests, not only to other scientists, but to project management at NASA and in industry. He served on advisory and working groups for the National Academy of Sciences, for NASA, and for the National Science Foundation. And very notably has been very active fostering future generations of scientists through his efforts for the National Academy of Future Scientists and Technologists. In 1991, Dr. Mather was presented with the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum Trophy, our highest honor. He shared the trophy for current achievement with the COBE team. In 2006, he, because of that prize that we gave him, of course, received the Nobel Prize for physics, along with Dr. George Smoot of the University of California at Berkeley. The prize recognized the recipient's discovery of the thermal nature of and the irregularities in the cosmic background radiation. This is the first time it became a thing that you could imagine. That is, using COBE, Dr. Mather and Dr. Smoot discovered, and I quote, the basic form of the cosmic microwave background radiation as well as its small variations. Work that confirmed the Big Bang and articulated early remnants of its structure and character. In 2007, these are the times when he has been here gracing.
So do you think they'll ever, like, come up with a fact instead of all these theories of how universe and matter, well, matter basically came into existence? Where did stuff come from? You know, what is this shit? Where did it come from? And so essentially that's what this whole program is about. You know, trying, like they say, trying to see as far away as possible to the oldest light. The older the light you can see, you know, then you can see the behavior of, like they say, early formations of stars and galaxies and shit. But here's what I don't understand. If the universe is spreading out in like every direction faster than the speed of light, then how do you pinpoint any given origin in the celestial sky? Like, which direction you looking in? If this shit is always expanding and spreading out, and it's been doing this since the Big Bang, then you should never be able to see the fucking beginning of that shit anyway. It'll always be moving away faster than the speed of light. How can you ever catch up to see that far back in time? It's ridiculous. But I guess they're going to explain that.
This stage, Dr. Mather generously donated a replica of his Nobel Prize to the museum. The Nobel Foundation, you may know, mints 3 medals for each laureate. Dr. Mather gave us one, gave NASA one, and he kept the gold one. Even so, it's my distinct honor and total pleasure to introduce Dr. John C. Mather.
Dude's a real astrophysicist. Shit about to get deep, son.
Well, my golly, after that introduction, I say, what a layabout that guy is.
And the first thing that astrophysicist says is, my golly. I love these guys, yo.
But well, my golly, after that introduction, I say, what a layabout that guy is. But it proves there was one small correction I need to make to David's story, which is I'm not a project manager, I'm a scientist. And the scientists are very appreciative of the project managers because they have a skill that I don't have. Now, they can make things happen with huge teams. So what I have to show you and what I have that we've learned with the COBE satellite, it was all because of managers and engineering teams and technicians that took ideas and made them real. So building something that was never built before to discover what was never known before. So today we are riding on an immense wave of discovery. Incredibly powerful human society that we're part of is now able to do practically anything at once. Takes a little while, but we get there. We are putting in huge efforts in every area of science and engineering. We are really only held back by our imagination and the laws of nature. If you can imagine it, you can build it. Almost.
You heard that motherfucker, right?
back by your imagination and the laws of nature. If you can imagine it, you can build it. Almost.
If you can imagine it, you can build it almost. So when you look at any kind of future tech that's in like movies and shit, man, don't think that shit can't be fucking made for real. So that's why alright, the Black Panther movie came out, Marvel Universe, all this, but whatever, yo. But I've never read a fucking Black Panther fucking comic book. I never really got into that shit until, that's the first time I ever seen anything about it was the movie. But I was always a fucking Iron Man fan. Tony Stark, because his fucking suit, yo, that suit just seems possible. And then once they came out with the fucking Iron Man movie and how they show the intricate details of the functioning and how it goes together and assembles and all this shit and different power components for it and all that shit, man, that shit is fucking possible. You know what I'm saying? It'll probably be like a couple $1 billion project to get one suit, but they got very similar shit, not as in depth as Tony Stark's suit, but the government got shit like that. So those armored mechs and all kind of shit like that, man. Like you say, man, anything that you can imagine, you can damn near do that shit. So that's why I like looking at sci-fi movies and futuristic movies, and they come up with these concepts for new technology, new ways of travel via air travel, motor vehicles, or underwater travel. Like that one movie 2012 that came out back in the day when you're talking about the Earth was gonna be destroyed and all that shit, and these motherfuckers built these big ass fucking arcs to save, important people and shit like that, yo. They probably got all kind of shit like that, man.
If it's not impossible, somebody will try it.
Mm-hmm.
We might as well be the ones. So thanks for coming to participate in the story I have to tell you about this grand vision. In 1954, I was 8 years old, and Mars was very close. We saw the planetarium show at the museum in New York City, the Hayden Planetarium. Before this one that we're in today existed, my dad bought a telescope from Sears Roebuck. It was about that big around, a little bit bigger than what Galileo had, and it wasn't nearly enough. And I've been waiting all my life for a better one, and I think we are still waiting for even better ones. We are getting them. So we used to know that the great Palomar telescope was the biggest one we would ever have, because you couldn't make a bigger piece of glass, and it wasn't worth it anyway because the atmosphere is too jumpy and make the shimmering, distorted images. So those have been beaten. We know how to beat that. So, and it was all, in those days, it was before the space age. But it was during the Cold War, when children like me were taught to hide from a nuclear bomb by gutting under the school desk. Even a kid could tell that wasn't going to work. But the space age, shortly after that started, spy satellites were built. President Kennedy said that we were going to the moon, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. And that we would do that and the other things. He promised we would do many, many things, and not just that one. And this was before the information came with billions of customers supporting millions of engineers to build whatever you want. So we're still riding that wave, and we're nowhere near the end of it. So we're not quite yet to the galactic civilization, but that was something else that was on my mind when I was 13. In the library, I was reading Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy. He talked about the great galactic civilization.
Isaac Asimov. So if you go into my history on my YouTube, and yeah, I've been listening to music for a while, but if you go back into my history, where in the hell? It's not that far back. Can't be. don't know. Oh no, there it is. Oh, you can't really see it, but right here is Isaac Asimov's Foundation audiobook, the full audiobook.
When you look down, the planet is revealing itself to you.
Side 1, Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Narrated by Robert Donnelly.
Yeah, I listened to like an hour or so. That book is really good too. And every like geeky ass scientist talks about that shit.
Civilization.
Like, oh, Isaac Asimov's Foundation shit was the shit, yo.
Find a solution.
I was like, let me listen to
in the
this.
library, I was reading to the Galactic Civilization, but that was something else that was on my mind when I was 13. In the library, I was reading Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy. He talked about the great galactic civilization and the need for scientists and mathematicians to find a solution that would enable a hidden foundation to preserve civilization after the great galactic civilization would crash because it was corrupt. So we still have a problem, and scientists and engineers are called upon to help us out through history. So Bill Gates says engineering is going to be the solution to a lot of our problems. I think he's right. I think we are not going to run out of the need of science and engineering anytime in our future history. And I think that future history is going to be very long indeed. So today I'll only show you a small slice of that vision, a small piece of the great James Webb Space Telescope that you see on the screen behind me. It is named for the man who went to President Kennedy with a plan for the Apollo program. And he got there, made it happen. Just 8 years after the speech announcing it was done, we sent people and they put their feet on the surface of the moon. Can you imagine that?
Nope.
So we proved we can do things.
I still really can't imagine that shit.
The people and the right mindset. We did, and we still do. So now I want to show you the telescope itself, talk about why it's important scientifically, a little bit about the engineering behind it, and just a hint of the science that we're going to hope to do with it. The future lectures in this series will tell you much more about that. So at any rate, here's the picture of the observatory on the screen. I don't know if my pointer will go there. Do you see a pointer up there? Yay! I've got a pointer instead of a laser pointer. Anyway, what you see in the middle is this gigantic mirror. It's 26.5 meters across. Okay, if I use metric units tonight, for those of us in the English units, it's 21 feet. It's bigger than what you see there on the screen. Anyway, it is protected by a big umbrella, a sun shield we call it, which is as big as a tennis court. It is a joint project of NASA along with European and Canadian space agencies. It's an enormous project. It's the most difficult one we've tried at NASA in science and engineering for science. It's clearly not as difficult as the Apollo program, but all the same, it's just very appropriate that we should be naming it after James Webb, the man. So to start with some of the big questions that are in front of us, some of the people asked these things before we got started here. How did we get here? So we know quantum mechanics, we've known about it since 1925 or so. We know that it governs the properties of everything. But if you want to know how anything complicated works, you cannot solve the equations. You have to go build it and measure it. We know the universe started expanding, that it was very smooth and very hot when it was young. We know that it's unstable in a whole host of different ways, and that energy can be released from reorganizing material into different shapes. So its complexity can build naturally. People didn't appreciate that, but it's a natural thing for complexity to grow here. The universe is probably infinite. I can't prove that to you. It is very old. It's about 13.8 billion years old, which means that there's been plenty of time and plenty of chances for the universe to do things that are very improbable, such as perhaps ourselves. There are not very many places like ours, so we might be the only ones, maybe not. But at any rate, each of us is quite unique. We know about stored information. We know how that works a little bit. We have evolution based on the stored information in our DNA. And when mistakes are made in the copying and sorting, we get
individuality. We get to blame our parents for all our troubles. And we also can say we have probably evolved, which I mark here as survival of the lucky. Because a long time ago when Darwin talked about evolution, people said, well, survival of the fittest. And since we're here, we concluded that we were the fittest. So that's not very good logic. We have evidence from the geneticists that perhaps our ancestral population very nearly perished, that they were down to a few hundred individuals.
Yeah, several
so
times.
We're here because those
I've heard that theory.
Lucky.
Like, there's probably been like 3 times in human history where we almost went fucking extinct. Like you say, well, he said several hundred, but the lowest I heard was like a couple thousand humans, on the planet, period. And that's why with the mitochondrial DNA, we can trace everyone back to just this one black lady from Africa, because there wasn't a lot of fucking people one time. That shit was crazy. Like you say, in the Ice Age, almost killed off a large fucking population, a large percentage of the human family. Like, shit was crazy, yo. Like you say, that shit, I don't know, it's lucky as fuck that humans are actually on this fucking planet right now, that we're actually that we actually made it this fucking long, yo. That shit is weird as shit, yo.
And we nevertheless they perished, that they were down to the fittest. So that's not very good logic. We have evidence from the geneticists that perhaps our ancestral population very nearly perished, that they were down to a few hundred individuals. So we're here because those people were lucky. And we nevertheless claim credit. We have learned about, in engineering, feedback loops, and we are still trying to understand how that works. Just as an example, I'm standing here and you still think I'm the same person, even though almost all of my atoms have been replaced numerous times, except for my teeth and the chromosomes in my nerves. So the rest of it has been changed out, and you still think I'm me. So there's a lot of mysteries besides astronomy to think about, and I just wanted to tell you there's a little bit more science to go. So astronomers look back in time. I guess everybody knows this one. I just like to draw this picture because it's my own hand-drawn picture. And so it shows you that you can look back in time by looking at things that are far away. And we know the speed of light is 1 light year per year, by definition. So we know how far back in time we're looking if we know how far away we're looking. So we survey the universe, we draw triangles, just like you were supposed to learn in high school. It's not that hard. If you know 2 angles and 1 side of a triangle, you can calculate the whole shape of the triangle. So that's surveying. The other method that we use is if we can't use the surveying method, we say, well, I'll look at those stars out there, and if I can convince you that those 2 candles that I drew in the picture are identical, and one of them just looks fainter, we say it's because it's further away, and we can get the relative distances. So that's worked pretty well. It's hard work, but it's standard practice. The other thing we need to do is how fast are things moving toward us or away from us, and we use the color of light to measure this. If you spread out the light of the fireworks displays that you see in July the 4th, you see each of those colors comes from a particular chemical element. We can see them in the light of the sun, either as dark marks across the rainbow, if we make a good optical instrument, or sometimes they actually shine out. Anyway, from this method we can find out what's in the sun, how hot the sun is, how it moves, and in particular we can tell if an object is coming toward us or away from us if the pattern of all those wavelengths is systematically shifted to longer or shorter wavelengths. So this is called the Doppler shift. We've known about it since the 19th century. So after a lot of preliminaries, Edwin Hubble became the first person to draw us a graph that showed this effect about distant galaxies. So 1929, he measured or tabulated the accumulated information about how far away are galaxies and how fast are they going. And this is the picture he gave us. First graph to show that the distant galaxies are rushing away from us with a speed proportional to distance. Divide the distance by the speed, you get the age of the universe. Real simple. people, it's not such a great mystery. But it was found out in 1929, and so we forget it was so long ago, and we now think it's a big mystery. So he did get the wrong answer for the age. Measuring that distance is actually pretty hard. And the biggest problem that he had was the standard candles that he were using close by and far away were actually different kinds. So he didn't know that, but we took a long time to find that out. Now we know, and now we argue about the slope of that line within 1% or 2. So we've made a lot of progress. So David mentioned in the introduction that we made a satellite to measure the Big Bang radiation. Here it is. This is called the Cosmic Background Explorer satellite, and it was made based on my failed thesis project and many other ideas to measure the heat of the Big Bang. So we measured it. It came out right. So I'm not going to skip over the details, but we'll just summarize it with a single chart telling you about the early universe. So we now know the early universe was very hot and very compressed. It probably has no center, at least we've not been able to find any sign of one. And there's no sign of an edge. You cannot see all the way to an edge because we haven't had an infinite amount of time. So even if light has been traveling all through time, you can still only see 13.8 billion light years at the speed of light. So we have the imagination says it's an infinite universe expanding into itself. There's no other universe out there for it to go into. And curiously enough, there is not a first moment. This confuses people a lot, but just imagine running the expansion movie backwards. So here we see all the galaxies are rushing apart. Imagine that they rush towards each other instead. When they start to collide and merge together, they get really hot. Atoms are destroyed, they're turned into individual particles, and you keep running backwards in your imagination, and it gets hotter and hotter and denser. But you never can get all the way to time zero. It's a curious thing. So you cannot actually say the universe was created. There was not a first moment in which it appeared. It has always been here. And this is just a curiosity of mathematics. But a lot of people called it the instant of creation. Well, it's not really. So it's also not a big firecracker because, it's just the wrong picture. If you think of a firecracker, you think of a little thing happening at a place and a time. What we actually have in mind as astronomers is an infinite universe expanding into itself. So probably also there's no end, but I can't prove that to you. So that was the basic demonstration that the universe is as we claim. We got a lot of evidence for it now. Now, what are we going to do about that? Well, even before the Great Hubble Telescope was launched, we started thinking about what are we going to do next after that. So one of my colleagues here, one of the future speakers in our series is...
That shit's starting to sound like religion. Now science is supposed to be able to measure and weigh everything. And they're saying, well, we measured the light, the distance of light, and it can only go so far because we don't have infinite time. And so we just assume that the universe just was. And it just is, and it's expanding into itself. Is that not God? It's like, isn't that the explanation for God that everybody gives, that all religious people give? Is like, so God made everything. All right, so where'd God come from? Who made God? Well, God just was. God is the end and the beginning, Alpha, Omega. So this motherfucker just said, this dude just said, the universe is God. Is that not? Am I drawing like some odd conclusion? Is that not what he said, yo? Basically. So we're all star stuff, right? We're all made from space junk. And so space made us. The universe made us. This is science. Right? So the universe made us because we're made of the same stuff that the universe is made of. And the universe has always been here. There's no end or beginning. Is the universe God? Is that what he's saying, that the universe is God?
don't know.
Garth Illingworth, sitting here in the front row, and he and a lot of other people had a conference, and they said, what are we going to build after Hubble? So the book addressed the question of what do we not know, and why don't we know it, and could we answer it with a bigger and better telescope? Of course, the answer is yes. And they worked out a lot of the possibilities, including some of them that look a lot like what we've actually ended up building. More conferences were held, and every 10 years the astronomers have this giant festival where we write a book about what's our top priority. In 1990, they didn't actually come out and say that they needed this new great telescope that we're building, but the committees, the subcommittees said so. So even in 1990, a long time ago, just a few months after the COBE satellite was launched, we already knew we had to plan for the future and something to come after Hubble. So here is the Hubble itself. Hubble is 27 years old, almost 28. Can you imagine that? It's going very well. It's been serviced, as you know, 5 times by astronauts that went up, visited it, put in new equipment, better equipment. This Hubble concept goes so far back in time that it's hard to imagine how primitive the equipment would have been if we were stuck with the old stuff. So we were really thrilled that you could do that and upgrade it so many times. 1990 was launched in April. So I guess everybody knows that we had a problem shortly after that. It was not in focus. So here is the astronauts working with the Hubble telescope. And here's a picture of a galaxy we took shortly after the launch. Bummer. NASA had a lot of jokes thrown at us. But we said, and Congress said, please fix it. And we did. So this was brilliant and wonderful, and immediately told us the universe is different from what we thought. So a committee was formed as soon as we had this to work on, and they said, what are we going to do next now? And they wrote a beautiful little book called HST, that's Hubble Space Telescope and Beyond, and they wrote an extraordinarily poetic little book that said, please build us a telescope that does infrared astronomy and make it bigger than before, if you could. So it still gives me chills to read that book because it's so well done. Committees don't always write good books. This one was. So here they are. Here is Alan Dressler, the chairman of that committee. And there's Dan Golden next to him. They met. Dan Golden heard what he had to say. And within a few months, at the meeting of the Astronomical Society, Dan Golden gave a plenary talk, and he said, I see Alan Dressler here. All he wants is a 4-meter optic that goes from a half micron to 20 microns. And I said to him, why do you ask for such a modest thing? Why not go after 6 or 7 meters? And he got a standing ovation. So I figured that was our first peer review, and it worked. Immediately after that, astronomers and engineers from everywhere wanted to work on this new project, and so we started. So we've had grand ambitions, and we are about to get there. So many more reports were written. So what was in that little book? Many mysteries that could become discoveries. What happened after the Big Bang? How did the first stars and the first black holes and the first galaxies grow? And what else could there be out there? How did the galaxies grow? Did the black holes start first and make the galaxies, or did the galaxies make the black holes? How do the supernovae and other exploding things affect everything?
What about the voids?
What's this dark matter and dark energy about?
Dark matter, dark energy.
To understand about it.
What is the void? How did the voids get there?
It had only been guessed at. It wasn't really known yet in 1995. How do the stars form, and what happens when they get old? They blow up, some of them, not everyone. The sun is not going to blow up, by the way, but it will change. Exoplanets we just didn't know much about. We were just getting onto it, that there were a few of them out there. Now we know that there's zillions, and that's a technical number. So pretty soon we were able to take a very long exposure with the Hubble Space Telescope called the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, and this picture shows a surprise. This is a picture of a place where there's like one star in this picture and all the rest of those little dots are galaxies. And it's spectacular because it was a surprise. We knew before we flew the Hubble telescope that galaxies could not grow very quickly. We must be able to see them growing with the Hubble telescope. By looking far enough out in space and far enough back in time, we can be able to tell how that worked. Well, the picture here shows us, yeah, that's not true. There are a lot of little red specks on there that say, guess what? The first galaxies were too red to even get into the Hubble wavelength range. And they were too faint for Hubble, even if it could cover it. So please, NASA, please build us a bigger telescope that can pick up the infrared light.
We need bigger.
A few years later,
telescopes.
We got to discover this effect. This effect is that galaxies that are supposed to be pulling each other together because of their mutual gravity, they're actually flying apart faster and faster all the time. This is now what we call the dark energy. The people who found this out got their Nobel Prize in 2011 because it was such an enormous surprise. They did it with that standard candle method, by the way. They said those little supernovae out there are 20% fainter than they should have been, so something's up. It was a little hard to convince people that they were right, but they were right. And now we have lots of confirming evidence. So now I've got a movie to show you, which is, from my perspective, the most beautiful movie I have ever seen. And now we need the lights down, because I'm going to show you a really, I'm going to show you how the galaxies may have grown from the very first moments. So can we get the lights all the way off? Maybe not yet. Maybe they didn't hear. I need to show you the movie anyway. So here's the movie. It shows the effect of gravity pulling cosmic material back together. So the gravity acting on the little inhomogeneities, the little seeds in the Big Bang material, is able to stop the expansion. So the computer scientists have simulated this in a box of universe that they're rotating in front of your eyes so you can see the structure growing. And within 1 billion years of the whatever started it going, the structure has already appeared. Galaxies are forming. They are forming in huge strings of material. They are stretched out in a very non-random fashion. These huge strings are actually coming together in sheets. Once in a while, the computer has lined up the line of sight so that it looks like everything is all in one plane, like right there. So who'd have thought that? Astronomers were stunned when they found this is actually what we see in the sky as well. So this movie shows something you could never observe because it shows time dependence. And we're not going to be able to wait for billions of years to see if this picture is correct. But what we can do is take pictures with the Hubble and with the James Webb Telescope and see if the pictures match up with what this movie predicts. This is not the most current movie, but it is the most beautiful one that I've seen. So here the movie is showing the universe has gotten to be about 7 billion years. When the universe is 9 billion years old, that's when a lot of these explosions that you see start to slow down. And that's a good thing because that's also when the solar system is being born. And it would be really hard to start a solar system next to an explosion like that. So about this point in the movie, that's when our solar system turns up and the great explosions slow down. Those explosions are coming from black holes and from exploding stars. So is this movie true? Got to take a picture, got to take a lot of pictures, and reason through the evidence. And eventually we'll be able to tell you what's the matter with this movie and does it turn out right in the end. But it's pretty darn good. By the way, it took modern technology to even be able to make the movie. Because I think what we have coming here next is the list of people who made it. And they needed millions and millions of CPU hours and the best computers you can possibly find. So we couldn't have done that a few years back. In fact, why do we need big computers like that? Well, other government agencies need them, and so do you. So anyway, what else have we seen? Here's a beautiful picture taken with the Hubble. Shows a nearby galaxy called the Whirlpool Nebula. And in the lower right corner, I've got a picture that was drawn by Lord Rosse in 1845. He had the biggest telescope in the world in that year, and it was made with a big metal mirror about 6 feet across. Sorry, 2 meters.
The next movie trailer could cost you up to 22 cents in data.
That's expensive.
Switch to Xfinity Mobile and save.
An ancient temple is discovered in the Middle East.
I did come from England. I used to live in the centre of the largest stone circle in Britain, well, world I think, which was Avebury in Wiltshire. Although I now live.
Have you guys ever heard of Göbekli Tepe? Well, some geologists said that the Sphinx is older than we think it is. And the archaeologists and the Egyptologists say, no. The Sphinx is only, 4,500 years old. And everyone else the geologist says, well, it looks older than that. It looks like it's 12,000 years old. And then, the Egyptologists and the historians and everybody else says, well, that's not really possible because people weren't doing things like that 12,000 years ago. And there's nowhere else on the earth where you can find some kind of structures like this that are 12,000 years old. And so then they found some place just like that. It's 12,000 years old. And now they saying, well, explain this, bitch. And it's fucking everybody's head up. It's like, we really can't explain that. Maybe the Giza Plateau is older than what we think it is.
Just outside of London, which is where I was born and brought up in my early years. Some people think my accent sounds like I come from Australia, but I don't. I come from London. It's a London accent. And some people say that I speak too fast, so I'll try and speak slowly. Try not get too excited, basically, because with a subject like Göbekli Tepe, you can get very excited very quickly, because we're talking about somewhere that's the oldest temple in the world, certainly the oldest constructed temple, and I'll be telling you all about that and how it relates to the stars and the cosmos and the source of the human soul itself. So, without further ado, let's talk about this place. It was constructed just after the end of the last ice age on a mountaintop in southeast Turkey. The earliest monuments there were created around 11,500 years ago. And there was occupation and building going on this site for around 1,500 years through until about 8,000 BC. And here you can see what we're looking at here. I mean, there's an incredible series of structures, which here's a reconstruction of what they look like. Now, these are what you would call stone circles, monumental architecture or so-called megalithic architecture. These are the prototypes of what would later become Stonehenge and all of the great stone circles around the world that can be found on virtually every continent. It all began at this place, Göbekli Tepe, 11,500 years ago. And the stones themselves are beautifully carved, and most of them have T-shaped terminations, and we'll see why that is shortly. And in the middle of these stone circles, these which are actually oval in shape, there are two much larger stones, two huge monoliths that act almost like gateways or almost like stargates towards somewhere. And that somewhere we'll be looking at as we go along. And on a great many of these T-shaped pillars, there are beautiful carved animals, either in low relief or in high relief, or even in 3 dimension. I mean, you can see here, there's this beautiful creature thought perhaps to be leonine nature that actually goes down the front, narrow edge of one of the stones. These strange looking birds here, which some people suggest might be baby dinosaurs, but I think that they're more likely to be some relative of the now extinct dodo, appear on the stones. And up here we have another creature which seems to be something like a lizard, or others have suggested it could be maybe another animal like a lion or something like this. But there are many dozens of different types of animals and creatures of the natural world that are seen there. I mean, snakes, foxes, boars, cranes, gazelles, aurochs, lizards, canines, ants, scorpions, lions, panthers, waterfowl, flightless birds, vultures, bears, wolves, etc. And most of these animals are not animals you're going to want to be in a confined space with. They're actually quite dangerous. They bite, they gore, they can sting, and they can cause a lot of damage, basically. And they're quite unlike the Ice Age cave art of southwest Europe, where you have the beautiful bisons and the animals and the mammoths and things like this, which are very graceful. There's a sharper edge to everything that's going on at Göbekli Tepe. And I think one of the reasons for this is that the society that created these, or certainly those that actually built them, were hunter-gatherers. They were not part of an organised society that had agriculture. This was yet to come. It would be there by the end of the period of activity at Göbekli Tepe, but it wasn't there at the beginning. But clearly there were people motivating, whoever was the builders, the quarrymen, the carvers, the priests, whoever was involved in this construction. There was obviously some kind of priestly or shamanic, or power elite behind them. And maybe we see these actually on the stones themselves, because the reason why they are T-shaped is because the T itself actually represents an abstract head of an individual. And the main stem of the stones often has carved into it these bent arms that curl around the front into these hands that come around to the front narrow edge.
Yeah, like
and these face either towards the centre
the heads
of
of Easter
the enclosures of the structures, towards these other two huge great monoliths in the middle. And here's a tiny little version of these T-shaped pillars that was found at a site near Göbekli Tepe in southeast Turkey. And you can see more obviously that these are a head. There's the head, and here is possibly the hair, or maybe even some kind of headdress or hood. And so that's exactly what they are. But the fact is they haven't got any faces. As we can see here, these stones, which represent the central pillars in what's known as Enclosure D, which are 18.5 feet tall, by the way, have these arms on them that end in these hands here. They even have belts belts round their centre. And this is something that we...
Yo, Michael, what up, what up?
was going on 11,500 years ago. Even they have their own glyphs, their own ideograms. This H symbol, this letter C, these other things here which we'll talk about shortly. You know, they've got their own written language. So who are these people? Clearly, we're talking about the remnant of a lost civilization. And as my good friend Graham Hancock will tell you, this is almost like the smoking gun of a lost civilization here in southeast Turkey. And let's put all this into perspective. I've mentioned Stonehenge before, and Stonehenge was nearly 7,000 years later than Göbekli Tepe. And the Great Pyramids themselves at Giza, which I shall be talking about tomorrow in my second lecture, Göbekli Tepe is 7,000 years, 7,500 years earlier than the Great Pyramids if we go by the conventional dating. Okay? Now this is extraordinary because what it means is that there were several thousand years from the time of Göbekli Tepe to the age of the pharaohs to develop their technology and their engineering. I think this is important not to forget. And Graham Hancock will have a lot to say about this tonight, and it's something that I talk about in my book, Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods. And that's the fact that just before Göbekli Tepe was constructed, there was a massive cataclysm in the world. It was almost certainly caused by a comet that disintegrated and broke up on entry into the Earth's atmosphere and devastated large areas of the planet. And this caused fires, and it caused floods, and it caused a period of darkness, and other terrible, terrible things in the world, which lasted for many hundreds of years, including a mini ice age. And it was at the end of this mini ice age, known as the Younger Dryas, that Göbekli Tepe was constructed. And there is no question that there is a relationship between the appearance of Göbekli Tepe for the first time and this cataclysm. It was almost like people were beginning to get themselves back together, getting themselves back on course after this terrible destruction had taken place. They started for the first time to create what we call monumental architecture. The megalithic architecture that we see here and many other places around the world, at Gunung Padang in Java, and even at Stonehenge. There was a proto-Stonehenge they now know about that goes back to 7,000, 8,000 BC at least, and maybe other sites that we still are yet uncovering or haven't properly got the dates on. And here's one example of the interest in comets at Göbekli Tepe. You can see this very strange symbol here that's like a circle with 3 bars and like this U shape around it. It's being worn as a belt buckle on one of these huge, large pillars. And almost certainly what we're seeing here is this comet. We're seeing the U-shape energies around the front of the comet, what they call the bow shock, and we're actually seeing the head of the comet itself with multiple tails. And we'll see that symbol again there. That's it here. Almost certainly that this was showing some kind of control over comets and the supernatural forces that were seen to bring these comets into the sky. And I'm sure that these people feared comets every time one appeared. And in some strange way, we still fear comets to this day, probably because of the destruction that took place 11,000, 12,000 years ago. Now, some of my colleagues will tell you that Göbekli Tepe was buried deliberately at the end of its life, possibly to preserve it from another cataclysm. But that's actually not true. What would happen is that the earliest structures were built on the bare bedrock, and after a period of time, let's say maybe 100 years or so, they would fall out of use and be decommissioned, very much like a Hindu temple or even a church is, and they would be covered over by earth like this, and another one built on top, or to its side, and then very gradually you constructed this huge occupational mound, or the word is tepe, which is where you get Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli means navel, or belly-like, some people suggest. And the word navel is often a metaphor to suggest the centre of everything, the centre of the physical world, and possibly even the centre of the universe, some people believed, or certainly the point of creation out into the world itself. And this went on through until the very last installations, the very last enclosures were built around 8000 BC, and then everything was covered up by earth and rubble, and everything was given back to Mother Earth, and all you're left with is this beautiful belly-like hill, as if that which had come from the earth has now been given back to the earth itself. And this is the reason why Göbekli Tepe has been so beautifully preserved, and we know that it dates.
An ancient temple is discovered in the Middle East. It's thousands of years older than the Egyptian pyramids. It dates from long before the earliest civilizations, like the Mesopotamian, the Minoan, and the Mayan. It was built when mankind was still in the Stone Age.
This is extraordinary.
But who built it, and why?
They are not from our world. They are human-like, but they are clearly not humans.
To solve the mystery, one man travels back 12,000 years, to the end of the last ice age. Long before we discovered pottery, writing, or the wheel.
It's like discovering that a 3-year-old child built the Empire State Building out of toy bricks.
For millions of years, mankind evolved slowly. We survived by hunting and gathering our food. Then, around 12,000 years ago, something extraordinary happens. Our development speeds up, and in a comparatively short space of time, we go from the Stone Age to walking on the moon. What was it that made us change so dramatically? Dr. Jeff Rose is an expert on early human history. He's spent years studying this mysterious turning point in our cultural evolution. He's now come to Turkey to investigate an astonishing discovery that might finally explain how and why we took that giant step out of the Stone Age to become who we are today.
Walking on the moon was not the greatest leap mankind ever made. It was probably learning how to farm and produce our own food.
The agriculture, that shit was agriculture and domesticating animals.
Down, to develop religion.
And that's something I looked up a lot too, like domestication of animals, yo. That shit is ingenious. It's fucking, I don't know, that shit was fucking genius to turn animals into food like that. And agriculture, just like figuring out how to grow or figuring out what plants give you the best nourishment and how to utilize the plants, how to nurture the seeds, and then to figure out like crops and all that shit, man. Agriculture was crazy. That shit is like you said, that's probably the single best advancement that mankind has ever fucking made, yo, ever. That shit is ridiculous. But then another one that comes up to me a lot too is like mining. Like who fucking mined for the first time, like actually when you think about they say the Mayans and everybody had gold jewelry and shit, right? How do you get gold jewelry? How do you get a piece of gold jewelry, a gold necklace or a gold ring? How do you get that shit? Well, you gotta have gold. And then you gotta have temperatures hot enough to make the gold malleable so you can bend it to your will. Okay, so where do you get the gold from? Well, shit is in fucking rocks. So who was the first person or first people to actually mine for this shit? That whole concept of taking ore from a rock and then having to smelt that shit, yo, because you gotta heat this bitch up hot as fuck. Like, it's like gold. If you look at it, it's just like a little rock. Like, how can you figure out if I heat this shit, I can bend it? Like, I don't know. That shit is one of the craziest mysteries, yo, for me, yo, is mining. Why did we start mining? Why is gold mentioned on the second page of the fucking Bible? What's so important about gold? Who the fuck mined that shit for the first time? And what people came up with smelting? Like, just a furnace to heat that shit and separate the good from the bad and to fucking make pure shit, yo. Girl with the gun? No. I still have that.
And build temples. Settlements grew into cities and then into powerful civilizations. Without having to hunt and gather for every meal, we had time to think, to invent, and evolve out of the Stone Age.
At least that was the theory until now. Something pretty incredible has been found here in Turkey that puts a whole new spin on our cultural evolution. I cannot wait to see it.
Turkey is an ancient land that bridges Europe and Asia. It's part of the Fertile Crescent, a swathe of the Middle East and Africa that includes modern Egypt, Israel, Syria, and Iraq. In this green belt, humans first settled, and the world's earliest civilizations arose around 5,000 years ago. And here is where the find has been made, at a place called Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe means Potbelly Hill in Turkish. Local people believe the hill to be sacred, perhaps with good reason. Professor Klaus Schmidt is a renowned German archaeologist. In 1995, beneath this hill, he made an astonishing discovery, and he's been excavating it ever since.
Hi, Trev. How are you?
Hi, Klaus.
Welcome here at the site.
Great to meet
Your
you.
first visit here?
This is extraordinary. I mean, I've never seen anything like this.
What Professor Schmidt found buried under the hill was a cluster of huge stone pillars, decorated with strange carvings. He knew he'd only uncovered a small part of the site. To find out how big it was, Professor Schmidt commissioned a survey with ground-penetrating radar. The survey covered close to 90,000 square meters, nearly as big as 20 football fields. The radar transmits radio waves into the soil, which bounce back when they hit a buried object. The variations in the reflected signal produce an image of what's underground. This enables Professor Schmidt to roughly establish the overall size of the site.
How big is the site?
300 by 300 meters.
300 by 300, that's massive.
With extreme care and patience, Professor Schmidt and his team have so far excavated 4 huge stone circles. Each one is surrounded by a high stone wall, broken at intervals by large T-shaped pillars. In the middle are 2 massive monoliths, up to 5.5 meters tall. These enclosures don't look like anything in existence today. What could they be used for?
How do we know nobody lived here?
It's clearly not for daily life.
Professor Schmidt has worked extensively on other prehistoric sites in Turkey and is very familiar with the kind of dwellings Stone Age people built. He believes Göbekli Tepe looks nothing like them. Perhaps the key to understanding this place lies in the impressive carvings on the pillars.
There you see a masterpiece of craftsmanship, a high relief. Most probably a leopard.
Is that all one block?
It's one block made from one stone, very well done, very naturalistic. You can see the ribs are clearly depicted on this animal, the nose, the muscles and teeth, an aggressive habit.
The craftsmanship is amazing. I mean, it looks like it could have been done yesterday.
Yeah.
So what is the significance of the animals here at the site?
But that's the whole thing when it comes to these sites too. They're saying, okay, this site may be 12,000 years old. And they're looking at the craftsmanship of the stone carvings of this leopard and snakes and all these other animals. Well, those skills in themselves, just to be able to carve a stone like that, it takes, several generations of work and knowledge and tool and experience to get that high level of craftsmanship. So, and to build, to go through a construction project like this, man, there needs to be a lot of fucking coordination. You gotta have blueprints, plans, motherfucking goddamn labor management and all kind of shit, yo, to even go through a major construction project like that, yo. And that knowledge in itself takes, several generations to even build up to that level. We're talking about, and they're saying Stone Age people. Well, obviously for thousands of years they've been doing this shit. They've been doing this shit. And just because that's the oldest one you found, it just maybe, it's the oldest surviving one location. And the other dude was talking about Graham Hancock, and that's what Hancock says. He basically points towards like some type of Atlantis that did exist somewhere that was grand, way grander than the shit we have now. Maybe, already figured out interstellar travel and shit like that. Well, why can't we, why don't we find more higher technology and stuff? And there is a bunch of shit we find that can't be explained. And the one thing I like to say, goddamn, even nowadays we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint and make everything recyclable or biodegradable. And so what if one of these older civilizations just were so close to nature, everything they built, even their dwellings were to a level of being almost organic, like shit, I meant to watch something about that too. These motherfuckers growing meat in a lab, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, but what if they just grew their homes some type of way and or grew their dwellings, and when they were no longer used, it would just decompose. That's a way you wouldn't ever be able to find an old civilization like that. But then the knowledge that was left, the remnants of that civilization, maybe was just massive stone building or block building, because we no longer have the techniques for nano construction in order to for different structures, but we do remember how the mathematics for cutting stone and moving heavy blocks and stuff like that. So maybe that's how those old builders came about, and that's why they're still there and standing. All right, my mind's jumping around real quick. Let me look at this quick.
Being top of the food chain has its advantages. But it takes 65 billion farm animals every year to feed our appetite for meat. And livestock farming is one of the biggest causes of greenhouse gas emissions. So two men are racing to come up with a radical alternative. They're using competing methods, but they share the same bold ambition. Man-made meat.
I think this is the new future of meat farming.
In 100 years, we'll look back on livestock in the same way we do today, the horse-drawn carriage.
If successful, they'll transform what's on all our dinner plates.
If I didn't think this was going to change the world, I wouldn't be here.
But are we ready? Most of us don't like to think too hard about what goes into putting meat on our plates.
Of course, it's a pity if you have small, young ones or so that you think, oh, it's a shame, but yeah, somebody has to do it.
In the Netherlands, one man is working towards a future where we won't need to kill a cow to eat beef.
I think we will look back at these times as sort of barbaric, that we still killed animals for our food. Live animals that are bred and killed for our pleasure.
Instead, Professor Mark Post is growing his own beef in a laboratory. His innovation could cause the biggest food revolution since farming began 12,000 years ago. And all he needs to start is a piece of flesh so small it could even be extracted from a live animal.
So this muscle has stem cells in it. From this piece of meat, we can easily grow 10,000 kilos of beef. Whereas this animal has only 100 kilos of beef. En voor het papierwerk moet ik binnen zijn, denk ik, hè? Ja, oké.
The clock's now ticking. Mark has to get his meat back to the lab before the precious stem cells start to die. Over in Los Angeles, California, a company called Beyond Meat is also racing to make meat outside the animal.
I wanted to instill in people the sense of urgency and the sense of scale of what we're trying to do. How's it going? What we're working on has global implications. It's really an epic challenge. We've relied on meat from animals for 2 million years, but how did you take the animal out of the meat production process?
Ethan Brown and his team believe they found a better way to feed the planet.
The black kale in particular looks interesting.
Meat is muscle, which animals build up over time from proteins in the plants they eat. Ethan believes he can improve on nature, and instead of waiting for the animals, extract the plant proteins directly.
And that's what everybody doesn't realize. Like, I don't know, because I've been working out a lot, so I've changed my diet a little bit. and try to understand, you know, what makes the body grow. You know, what do you need to grow? And it's proteins. And people say, oh, well, you gotta eat, you know, steaks and burgers to get that good protein. But the thing is, like, animals don't make protein. You know, a cow just, you know, yeah, beef has protein in it, but it doesn't come from the cow meat. It comes from the plants that the cow ate. All protein essentially is plant protein. And it's weird because no animal that we eat eats meat. You know what I'm saying? We don't feed our livestock meat. None of them that I know of. Like, but then we eat meat for the protein because the meat that we're eating ate plants. So, like you said, why don't you just cut the animal out the equation? And if you want it to taste like meat, just figure out how to take the plant protein and make the plant protein taste like animal flesh. I guess I don't know. Like I went vegan for a minute and tried to figure it out, but I was too healthy. I started losing weight. Like, oh, wait a minute, I don't need to lose no weight. But you can be like a heavy vegan. You just gotta eat a hell of a lot. I can't eat that much, yo. You know what I'm saying? I said, damn, I lost 7 pounds. Trying to be healthy. But I don't know. Meat grown in the laboratory.
Using steam and pressure, they're then rebuilt into something he calls plant meat.
Plant meat.
The question just fascinated me is why would you run plant matter through an animal to create meat when you could actually get the constituent parts directly from the plant and create.
Take a deep breath. Want to know how you did that?
Oh, they got Will Smith doing the science program?
Ethan's creation has already attracted some major investors, including Bill Gates.
Do we want to do some colorimetry as well for this body?
And Beyond Meat is one of a growing number of companies hunting for the lucrative formula that will convince the world's carnivores to stop eating animals.
We want to become the next great American meat company. And we're talking about feeding, 7, soon to be 9 billion people. There's a lot of money in it. What's happening? What's happening, Dave? Come on.
To bring his product to the masses, Ethan aims to build a burger that's so meat-like, consumers can't distinguish it from the real deal.
We got some more of that smokiness into the flavor.
Good. Perfect. We do have a really broad set of disciplines in terms of science, so you have
Battery low, please charge now.
just to culinary folk. So everybody in this room needs to be an expert in exactly what makes meat meat. They have to understand meat like Jimi Hendrix understood his guitar.
Helping make Beyond Meat's burger as meaty as possible is one of their newest recruits.
I am the texture guy. I'm a texture analysis specialist. It's a little softer than usual. Okay. The goal is to bring forth that mouthfeel of a nice chewy, flavorful, maybe fatty burger.
Another member of the team is Simone. She's attempting to improve the burger's taste.
I'm a chemist, and I've worked here for a month. I deal with a lot of aroma and flavor, and as well as oils. It's really cool because every day you come up with a new formula, and maybe that's the best one, and it's going to make it to the market. Who knows?
I think so. What we're looking for here is the sizzle, the aroma. Okay. Yep.
The team will soon reveal their latest products to investors and consumers.
That smells pretty good, actually.
But reinventing the most iconic of American foods is a challenge that doesn't faze Ethan.
I look at what Henry Ford did with the automobile and how he replaced the horse-drawn carriage with that. And I think a lot about that he provided something to people that was better.
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
I mean, if we can do that, if we can be part of a small group of people that separate meat from animals for the first time in human history, that is really exciting.
Across the Atlantic in Maastricht, Mark Post is starting the process he believes will revolutionize the food chain. One stem cell at a time.
You see now the
tissue roll in the bottom.
Once extracted, the cells are placed in a nutrient-rich serum that enables them to grow just as they would inside an animal's body.
The technology is not very hard. You could do this basically at home if you like, yeah. I think this is the new future of meat farming. The stem cells in this bottle can feed 2,000 people for a year. This little bottle here. This is the beginning of an industry that could be as massive or even larger than meat production is right now.
In 2013, Mark revealed his first ever lab-grown beef burger to the world's press.
Everyone sitting here with bated breath is dying to see what's underneath the cloth.
Yeah.
There's quite some intense taste, close to meat.
2 years on, he's still working on the technology to scale up production. And there's some way to go.
It tastes like what it looks like. It tastes like a hamburger. The whole procedure takes about 9 weeks.
It's not exactly fast food. Over in LA, Ethan Brown has no regrets about the different path his company is taking to the marketplace.
I've looked very carefully at lab-grown meat before I started this company, but what I didn't want was an endless science project.
Ethan's already selling his plant meat in supermarkets. And with the fourth biggest food company in the US, General Mills, he's about to launch a new range of ready meals.
I see.
Ethan hopes they'll show everyone his meat can replace the real thing. At least with the help of some spicy sauces.
These are largely ethnic dishes, and what's great about that is it's much easier for the consumer to basically be fooled.
Today, some of Beyond Meat's investors are tasting them for the first time.
This is the last opportunity for us to fix anything that might be wrong, or to improve anything that might need improving. So it's important feedback that I'm getting. Very important. Fingers definitely crossed. Yeah. Good to see you. So, here we go.
With the investors now assembled, it's time for
So I'm doing a few paintings of myself. Obviously, I'm fully clothed in all of them, so there's not a lot of skin tone to paint. So I just decided to just go through them and go through all 3 canvases and just put the skin tone on there first and go ahead and get that portion. So I'm gonna do that one next. And so at least I'll have a foundation layer of paint on the skin tones. I'm gonna go back to this one, and should be the first one I complete. So, but these are gonna be some pretty cool paintings. And I think I'm about to get out of here for a minute, guys, because I'm hungry. I'm gonna go take a break and play some video games. I probably actually finished listening to this Clone Meat shit. Oh, damn, Michael. I put all that shit in the storage. I was running out of space in here, man. Like, honestly. Especially with these new canvases I got in here too, is have nowhere to put shit. So a lot of my older paintings are in storage now. I think I might have like some kind of summer sale or some shit to get rid of like a lot of my old smaller paintings. Because, I don't know, it took me a long time to start doing canvases this big and larger, so a lot of my older shit is really small. Actually, I'm thinking about getting rid of a lot of those.
I'm definitely hungry. Yeah. I gotta go grab something to eat. Oh man. Let me shut this computer off. Durka. All right, guys. If you have not ever been to any of my sites, I think my Instagram is growing really fast now. But my Facebook is still pretty good as well. I don't know. A lot of people don't visit my Paintings by the Prince Facebook, but I think it's fucking awesome. But yeah, definitely go check out one of my social media links, and so you can see a lot of my other paintings, especially if this is your first time in my stream and you haven't seen my art before. Definitely go check out some other stuff. Peace. Until next time.